Good evening. You're watching The Context with me, Katrina Perry. Thanks for being with us. Well, we've been talking about foreign policy and the first visit of Secretary of State Marco Rubio abroad, but there'll be a big high point next week for President Trump with the visit of his first foreign leader since taking office for the second time. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be at the White House on Tuesday. So he will be the first visitor to the White House. It's always quite significant what visitor the president chooses to have first, what world leader. So let's talk about this with our panel. Democratic strategist Kelly Hyman is still with us, former federal prosecutor Joe Moreno, and Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, former ambassador, is with us now as well. Just want to get all of your views on the fact that it will be Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the first foreign leader coming to visit in the White House. Kelly, what do you think?
I'm not surprised at all when you look at it from a strategy standpoint, and you also look at it who you've aligned with in the past. So I definitely do not see that as being any surprise, but one hopes always that there is peace in the Middle East and there some type of resolution, because what goes on in the Middle East affects all of us, not only in the Middle East, but abroad.
And Joe, what about you?
Well, I think I would say that there's many things to criticize Donald Trump on. But this fixation by the American political left to kind of hang on this sort of Nazi, Hitler, fascist label to him, I mean, it's really grotesque, because Donald Trump has probably been the best American president friend to Israel in modern history. The fact that he has imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court, which harassed Benjamin Netanyahu, his executive order to better vet Hamas sympathizers and students on campuses that harass Jews here in America. So I think that really it's not surprising at all. And I think people really don't like this sort of smear that the left imposes on him. They really should stop that. It's not at all benefiting their cause. And I think it's fantastic that Donald Trump is advancing this very strong alliance America has with Israel.
And Gina, in addition to your role in the State Department and your former ambassador to Malta, of course, you're also with the head of the Middle East Policy Council at the Atlantic Council. So you're very across these issues. In terms of Prime Minister Netanyahu coming here, will there be an ask? Will there be a push to further the negotiations? What do you see the conversation being like between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yes, thank you. I do think there will be an ask. This first visitor to the new U.S. president is a wonderful feather in the prime minister's cap. It is very meaningful. It talks about the importance of the relationship, the importance that the U.S. president attaches to the relationship, and specifically to the prime minister. It will be very helpful to him domestically. I know he's seeking to shore up his support. He's got troubles domestically with his corruption trial still ongoing. And so President Trump surely knows all of this and knows just how important it is for the prime minister. And his ask is really going to be along the lines of, don't mess up this ceasefire. The prime minister has pressures from the right in his coalition that do not want the ceasefire to continue, want the war to resume, do not have the hostages as their primary focus and priority, and want to go after either Hamas more thoroughly and or, as we've heard discussions about, ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip. And we see what's happening in the West Bank as well, with additional land grabs from settlers and the continued clashes that are resulting in Palestinian civilian deaths as well as fighters. So President Trump has made a commitment to getting the hostages out, particularly getting American hostages out, and he wants to be able to do that. He said he wants to be a peacemaker. That's how he wants to be viewed. He does not want the prime minister to treat him the way the prime minister treated President Biden.
And Kelly, when Prime Minister Netanyahu came in July, it was quite a controversial visit. We saw lots of protests around Capitol Hill when he was making that speech to the joint houses of Congress. We saw some lawmakers, in fact, boycott that speech. It's less controversial now that the ceasefire deal is in place and humanitarian aid is flooding to Gaza. But do you think there will be protests? Do you think there will be some who will not be in favor of this visit?
Well, that's what's great about our country is people can get out there if they don't like something and protest. And so potentially that could definitely happen. And if there's certain issues that are going to affect the American people and our political leaders don't support it, then they could potentially not participate in the meetings. But I think it's important that us as a country should come together and unite. And it's important for us to have leaders that don't divide us, that unite us and bring us together, and not blaming one party or throwing more mud or saying, oh, the liberals are doing this or the Democrats are doing that. Let's come together and work. He is the president of the United States, whether you like him or don't like him, but he's the president for all the people. He's the president for the people that didn't vote for him. He's the president for the people that voted for him. He's the president for the Republicans, Democrats, and independent, and should lead for all the people.
Joe, do you think this issue, this turning this ceasefire deal into something more permanent and more long-term, is something that President Trump can achieve during his term?
Let's hope so, because he will also be judged on top of the economy. He'll be judged on his boasts about dealing with the situation in Ukraine as well as the West Bank. I'll agree with Kelly in terms of the right to speak out is absolute, and it absolutely should be respected in this country. And it's also not a time to point fingers politically. However, I do think it is a time to call right and wrong in terms of what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, Hamas's activities are grotesque, and the fact that they are building themselves around hospitals and schools, and what they've done to the Jewish people is absolutely absurd. And so I do think that there are times to say both sides have a point, and then there are times to call out right and wrong. And in this case, the right is on the side of Israel, and the absolute wrong is on the side of Hamas in Gaza.
Gina, what about you? What's your view on this? Can this temporary deal be turned into something more permanent with a push from President Trump?
I think it's going to take President Trump to keep it on track, without a doubt. This is a case where he, giving him full credit, was able to accomplish something that President Biden was not. In spite of all the work that the Secretary of State did, that the president at the time did, they could not bring it over the finish line. And President Trump's threats on the one hand, but also his nature of not being dependable one way or the other. If he's putting America first, then he has got to put America first, which is to recognize that there has been reputational damage to the United States during the last year of the war. A heinous attack by Hamas without question. No one is arguing with that, of course, and that the Jewish people, the Israeli people have the right and responsibility to defend themselves. And yet 45,000+ people. And the world saw it, and we saw the civilians. We realized that there's going to be a significant number of women and children. We already know that. And that cannot be ignored. And so President Trump bringing this ceasefire to fruition must be applauded, and his willingness and stick-to-itiveness to see it through. We can support him and whatever he needs to do, because he is willing to use carrots as well as sticks. He could keep it going, and it's going to take him as well as those in the region. But if anyone can do it, I think he can.
Okay, well, let's wait and see. On that hopeful note, in everyone's interest, Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, thank you so much for joining us here on The Context with your views. And we will talk to you again.